Hey, it's Stratosphere Lounge. Hey, everybody. It's your host, Bill Whittle, here with, again, the three-card Monty of internet shows. Maybe I'll hit the record over here, too, just for giggles. Who knows? How is everybody doing? We had to move to Thursday. We get backed up a lot with shooting a bunch of things. Shot 5 segments yesterday, which were a lot of fun. Called the 60-second Smackdowns, which I'd been doing for TPUSA, and which I've also decided to make available for members to call in with a nasty question as submitted by a vile progressive type, and then you can get an answer from me in 60 seconds as the clock goes down. If somebody could remember to tell people in the comment section if you're watching this live to hit the refresh, because when we stopped the Wirecast thing and went to once again to the web-based viewer, everybody has to refresh their things. So if you could do that, that would be great. So anyway, yeah, it's been a busy week as always. I've got new house guest. If you've seen the videos, my cousin, second cousin, called and said she'd found a bird on the side of the road, and he wasn't in very good shape, and she'd heard that I'd taken care of one before, and sure enough, we had, and so she brought it over, and Natasha and I have been taking care of it, and volume seems kind of low, doesn't it? Am I on the good mic, or I'll just double check this. I know it's just embarrassing, but it's just been one of those lives, yeah, it looks like it. Anyway, so we had this little thing, and it's a little starling. We thought it might have been a woodpecker for a day or two there, but it's actually a starling, and he's a neat little guy. We call him Chirpy. And my cat Pismo, who I've had for a while, when he came from the vet, he came to the house with a kennel cough, bad nasal infection, and so cats won't eat if they can't smell anything. He couldn't smell a thing, so I had to feed him that same kind of stuff, kitten chow through a syringe. And if you saw the video we put up earlier, boy, I'll tell you what, he sure did look like he was having a good time flashing back to those things. So that's about it, I guess. Suppose we can get into the show here and figure out what's going on in the wonderful world of questions. Because once again, I'm just slammed. All right, let's move some windows around here and get serious about what we got here. Okay. There we go. All right, so look who's back. It's Cindy Lucin, who we haven't seen for the longest time. Hi, Cindy. And she wants to know, quoting British psychologist Robin Skinner, if overly sensitive people can't control their emotions, then they'll have to start trying to control other people's behavior. You got that right. Bill, would you agree that this is a fundamental problem with a growing segment of our societies today? Is there a cure for this basic human deficiency that plagues our species? Yeah, there's an easy cure, and that is don't tolerate it. Just don't put up with it. I'll stop chewing now. Give me 1 second. These snowflakes have turned the world into a collective nightmare for everybody, themselves included, because they never ever had a chance to experience any kind of hardships. Losing a baseball game or something. I'm not going to tread down this whole ground again and again and again, but losing a baseball game is too hard on them, apparently. And so since they never had to lose or deal with any kind of failures and everybody came in first, then they've never had to deal with hardship. And so when they're confronted with hardship, they freak out. They start to cry or do the next best thing, want to huddle up in a safe space someplace. And that's the kind of response you would expect from a 4-year-old who is stressed and maybe angry and, sad and embarrassed and all the rest of the things that come with failure and hardship and setbacks. But unfortunately, they didn't get to learn that lesson at 4, and they didn't get to learn it at 14, and they're probably not going to get to learn it at 40. So they would say, losing hurts my feelings, so let's set it up so that we never lose any sports. Okay. Then they say, geez, hearing opinions that are different than mine in college, that hurts my feelings. It causes me emotional stress. Okay, let's make sure you never hear anything new in college either. Let's make sure you go into college stupider than you were when you came out. And then they enter the workforce and they say, I would like a job where mostly I can just sit back and check my Facebook pages. And we've had a couple of good millennials here, but we've also had a couple of people who basically just come in and expect to get paid to just basically sit there. And they want raises and expect to get the company car. And when you ask them what they did to deserve this, they look at you like you're, from Mars. What do you mean, what did I do to deserve this? I came to work, right? I mean, I showed up. I am a participant, and where is my participant trophy of a new car or whatever the case may be, So, yeah, Cindy, it's not just a problem. It's actually the problem. I honestly think it's the problem. If I look out into the future, the 20, 30, 50-year future, as far as we can, reasonably foretell, the only problem I worry about is the quality of the people, because there's nothing out there that's a threat to this country that this country couldn't deal with very, very quickly and very effectively if we just had adults here. Our resident millennial, Eric Blake, who's smarter than the average bear, says that he was surrounded by idiots. And it's not just idiots. You're surrounded by infants as well. And infants are idiots. I've tried to reason with them, and I'm sure you have too. And you can't get them to fly an instrument approach. You can't get them to balance their checkbooks. 4 or 5-year-olds, they're just pretty much stupid as can be. So, what do you do about it? Well, we've been doing exactly the wrong thing. We just continue to give them what they want. And now there are these classes and special, courses and special instructors who go to companies and tell them how to deal with millennials. And basically what they tell the company owner is that you're going to have to do to them, for them, everything that's been done for them their entire lives, which is, in other words, make sure that they're very comfortable and happy, don't put too much of a stress on them. And to be honest with you, I've worked with enough of these people to say that they're just, it's not even that they're not worth the money. It takes me more time to do what they're supposed to be doing and look over their shoulder and make sure they're doing it than it would take me to do it myself. So the long answer is it's going to take a while, but the short answer is you can't cheat reality. Sooner or later, they're going to be the oldest people in society. At some point they will be. There will come a point when there will not be anybody left to take care of these 40, 50, 60-year-old children. So they are going to be in for, well, we're already seeing it. Cindy, we're already seeing 30-year-old, 25, 30, 40-year-old people, 20s certainly, and they can't do laundry. And if they ever do get an apartment, they completely freak out. They don't want to drive. They forget about wanting to drive. They won't do it. Why do they need to drive? I've got Uber. I can go wherever I want to in Uber. Somebody else can drive. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I noticed that virtually all of the video games that are coming out now, almost all the big titles anyway, and I think this is actually extremely indicative. Almost all of them are third-person shooters, and what that means is that if you're going to play a game where let's say you're playing a soldier and you're trying to shoot other players who are playing soldiers, a first-person shooter is what the name suggests. You look out the window of the screen, and this is what you see. And as you run along, you see the ground going, and if you hold up a rifle, you can see your rifle come into frame. And older video gamers like first-person views because it gives them a sense of being in the world, and that's why they go there. But now, more and more and more of these young people are playing third person, and third person shooter is when you stand behind your own character. What I find especially alarming about that, which I've always hated third person shooter, I've always hated that position, it just drives me nuts. But here's what I find interesting about that. More and more and more young people are playing this third person game, so it's not about, hey, I think it would be cool to go into the jungle or do whatever or fly through space. That's not what's really happening. What's happening in third-person shooters is saying, hey, I think it would be cool to watch myself do it. Not to pretend to do it, but to watch myself doing it. And that may not sound like a big deal to you, but it is a big deal. And when you see more and more of these games where you never actually get inside the player's head, you are looking down on the player, and you can see all the cool combat moves they make, and you can watch them running over tree trunks and all the rest of that stuff, but it's not like it's happening to you. So in other words, even in computer games, they're spectators in their own lives. They're not participants in their own lives. They're spectators in their own lives. And when they go into a computer game, they would rather watch themselves doing something than to actually feel like you're doing it. Man, I don't know. Reality is postponable, but not unavoidable. And the time is going to come, and it's coming, when all of the things that they should have dealt with as stresses, which are major stresses, if you're a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, you lose a baseball game, or somebody calls you a name, or somebody threatens to beat you up after school, and all these things are stressful things to 7 or 8-year-olds. I'm not particularly threatened by any of those today, I don't think. In fact, people call me names and threaten to beat me up after school all the time, and I just pretty much don't care. But that's because when I was 7 or 8 or 9, I had to deal with it then. And then all of the teenage things that you have to deal with. You find that more and more young people all across the world they're not only not good at it, they're just not doing it. They're walking away from it. I don't know what the percentage is exactly. I want to say it's about 30-40% of Japanese males in their mid to late teens, all the way up into their 20s or 30s, and higher, I guess, have just plain abandoned anything that we would call a life. They've not just given up on it, they've given it up. They've not just gotten disappointed with the dating game and social game. They just walk away. Known miscreant Matt Lloyd points this out. He says it's actually worse than that. I was talking about third-person shooters and stuff. When I do this video game pitch, I talk about I've got 107,000, 120, maybe it's 130,000, something like that, subscribers on YouTube. Number one YouTube channel belongs to a guy named PewDiePie. PewDiePie is a Swedish guy, and he has 66 million subscribers. And as known miscreant Matt Lloyd points out, the reason he's got so many people is because people are not even playing computer games. They're not even playing computer games, and they're not even watching themselves play computer games. They're watching somebody else play a computer game, watching himself in a world that doesn't exist. And I don't know what to say about that. It's just unbelievably appalling. But reality will not be denied. And there's going to come a point when these people are going to have to care for themselves. I think we can say with some confidence, and of course I'm generalizing, that there are mostly people in the military who are millennials. There are many superb, hardworking people. Our current our office manager, operations manager is a millennial, grew up on a farm, and and all of that. But I can't even call it laziness, although there's certainly some laziness there. They don't take the initiative, not because they're lazy. They don't take the initiative because they don't know how. They don't know how to do it. They simply sit and wait. And it's for somebody to tell them what to do. And then you tell them exactly what to do, and they'll do it. And sometimes they'll do it okay, pretty well. But if you have to constantly be telling everybody what to do in their daily job, comes a point when you realize it's just easier and certainly cheaper for me to do this myself. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion. That's simply this. as much as I despise the whole thing and it just really angers me, they didn't do it. The millennials did not do this to themselves. They didn't decide how they were going to be raised. They're not the people that made the rules. They're not the ones who said that they can't have any stress or want to make sure that they've got a life preserver on when they take a shower. That's not their fault. That's their parents' fault. And it's just one more whole can of worms I'm about to open here. This is my personal feeling, and I know some people might disagree with this, but people talk about, oh my God, what's the word? Good Lord. I hate it when this happens. Autism. Sorry, I remembered Asperger's. I couldn't remember autism. So the number of cases of autism in society is something like 300 times what it was 20 years ago. Now, I don't believe that the environment has changed to that degree. I don't think that I certainly don't think it's things like, this whole vaccine thing or anything like that. I think that the reason that the autism rates have gone through the ceiling is because time and time and time again, I see people either ignoring children that are having a temper tantrum because it's all they do, or trying to reason with them. Some 3 or 4-year-old screaming at the top of their lungs, and mommy will crouch down there and say, look at me. Remember what we said about it? No, he doesn't. He doesn't remember what we said about that. Remember how we talked? No, he doesn't remember how you talked about it. He doesn't understand the value of decency and good manners because he's 3. And this whole idea, of, well, we're going to reason with our children. We're not going to punish them or anything. My God, how could we? What kind of people would we be if we ever punished them? And so what they've done is, because they haven't punished their children, I'm not saying beat them. And I'm not saying certainly don't beat them to death. Do not administer a fatal beating to your child. That's not what I'm saying. But this idea that, well, I don't want to hurt my kid. I don't want to spank my kid. I don't want to punish my kid. And that means I'll be a better parent and he'll like me more. If you don't do that, if you continue to reason with creatures that do not have the cortical ability to reason yet, then if you don't get them disciplined in the beginning, you're not helping them. You're condemning them to a life of misery. And you see this time and time and time again. Those kids who are, and you don't see many of them anymore, but you think about my father's generation, or the people that settled the Old West, kids were left to go and fend for themselves. And if they got themselves into, fatal danger, their parents would ride in there if they could and help them just as much as they needed so that they could get, not eaten by the bear, and then still let them walk home or figure out a way to do it, learn something from it. And I can say that this autism epidemic is largely due to that, because, as it turns out, I have a nephew who is extraordinarily autistic. I mean, really quite severely autistic. And I don't see those symptoms in many of the children that I am told are autistic, by their parents, and that sentence that just drives me insane. On the spectrum, he's on the spectrum. Really? He's on the spectrum. That means that somewhere between being a little bit emotionally unstable and not being able to communicate, sitting in a corner and just making sounds, somewhere between those two extremes is the autism spectrum. And I have heard, it's just my personal experience, but I have heard many parents say, Jordan's on the spectrum. And they say it in a very caring kind of way. But there's also a certain kind of pride there, And it's kind of, Jordan's not like the other boys. He's on the spectrum. He's a little bit, he's a little bit special. He has some special needs. Of course he does. He has special needs. That means you're a special person for having produced him, right? What a special parent you must be. And how suffering, too, put up with all this special needs kids. Here's what I think is interesting about all this, and it's gone a long way to form my opinion on it. I have friends who I know rather well, and they teach acting for children here in Los Angeles. Some of it is for people who want to condemn their kids to this life, and some kids genuinely like acting early, and there's a lot of stage moms and dads pushing them on stage. That's a catastrophe and a tragedy itself. So what's interesting is this. Time and time and time and time again, they said, 20, 30 times a year, and they've been doing it for 10 years. They will have a parent come in and say, Jordan's on the spectrum. He gets emotionally excited and upset about things. And sure enough, he's emotionally excited and upset. And he starts acting out and screaming and running around and so on. And what they said was, when the parents leave him, because they don't allow the parents to stay, all the parents have to go. When the parents leave, 2 or 3 minutes later, the kid calms down. And if he's not getting the response he wants from this temper tantrum, then he behaves himself. And that it's and they said it's like watching a switch go on and off. When the parents leave, the kid behaves more or less normally. When they come back, he starts acting up again because it works. It gets attention. Kids are not allowed to compete for anything now. And with the number of kids that are sent to daycare, where they're instead of being raised by a mom with 2 or 3 brothers, I don't mean any disrespect for people who put their kids in daycare. I understand the world is the way it is, and I'm just saying these are pretty well documented results of this. When your kid spends most of his time after school with in a room, and put aside the quality of the daycare center, let's say the person's terrific. Maybe more caring and more talented than their actual parents. But if you're in a room with 30 kids and you want attention, you have to find a way to get attention. And it's not just, hey, mommy, you gotta find a way to deal with mommy who's got 29 other kids to be watching. All of these things work together. And then all of the social inventions reinforce this. So I think it's got a lot to do with this whole, I think the whole thing started with the so-called self-esteem movement. And as I said, these kids didn't ask for this themselves. So if they didn't ask for this, since the kids didn't ask for the self-esteem movement, since the kids didn't ask for, we don't want to keep score at games and everybody's a winner, they didn't ask for that. Their parents gave it to them and insisted on it. And I think the reason is because their parents didn't have the emotional strength to be tough with their kids. They just didn't have the courage. And so, they're just robbed of everything. And there's something here I just saw I wanted to add to because I thought it was a really good point here. Hang on one second. Hang on. That was one good point I really did like. I can't seem to find it. Now, I'll just say one more thing on this. Everybody knows I've been working on this Star Citizen game and stuff, and that plays to a somewhat older crowd, and that's appropriate because they're the ones who are doing most of the voting. And I'm usually in front of these things, but this is one of those things I just plain missed. I didn't hear about it until, 3 or 4 days ago. And it's a video app. It's a mobile app called Fortnite, and I heard about it just 4 or 5 days ago because of a story about a girl in England, a 9-year-old girl who's in therapy now, under constant psychiatric care and watch, because she simply could not stop playing Fortnite. And when Dad would come to her after playing for 10 hours and say, honey, it's time to turn this off now, she'd get physically violent with him and start hitting him. And apparently, what it took for Dad to take action when he should have taken action a long time before. Once you say it's time for this to stop, now it's time to go to bed, they don't go to bed then, it's time for that machine to go away for a week. And if it happens again, it goes away for a month. And if it happens after that, it just goes away ever, period. But Dad finally decided that the problem was serious when he came into the room and found his daughter was playing Fortnite, and she was sitting on a cushion that was soaked in urine because she would not or could not get up from the game to go to the bathroom. So she just wet herself so she wouldn't have to leave the game. And at that point, he decided to do something. Now, Matt says that it was downloaded 24 million times in less than 24 hours. I heard about Fortnite because just for skins now, the skins are like things that identify your character. You get different kind of skins, makes you a different character type or different clothes or outfits or whatever. They don't affect the play of the game. They don't much give you a big advantage. You just make your character look more unique and more personalized. Somebody said that Fortnite had made $300 million in skins, just skins, since the beginning of 2018 or something like that. Yeah, Fortnite. Now, Fortnite's an old English term. It means 2 weeks. But after I heard about this, I had to look and see what Fortnite was. So 2 million, I said 24. Anyway, 2 million in 24 hours. So I had to look at it and find out what all the fuss was about. So I saw the Fortnite trailer. And it's absolutely brilliant in the same way that a great white shark is perfectly constructed. From the looks of it, I haven't played it and I don't expect I will. But from the looks of it, it's combining a number of things that were enormously popular into kind of like this crack cocaine of video games where all of the things about one game or kind of game is combined with all of these things about another kind of game and all these things about another kind of game. So there's elements of Second Life or one of these games where you have an alternate character in an alternate universe and you meet your friends and you're this 6'4", blonde model Amazon, and you're wearing, brass bikini. And so there's that whole alternate character living through your avatar aspect. It's an interesting looking shooter. So there's that whole first person, third person shooter thing. There are creatures that are somewhat like zombies. So you get your Walking Dead, doses there. But the two things I noticed about Fortnite were that in addition to all of these things and the social connections and all the rest of it, it looks like a shooter from the outside. But the two things that I recognized in Fortnite is, one of them is tower defenses appear to be built into Fortnite. Tower defense is a kind of game that's actually very fun. I got really kind of hooked on a tower defense game for 3 or 4 months. And a tower defense game works like this. There's a pathway. You're looking down from the top, basically, or from a fixed angle. And there's kind of like this little roadway, imagine. And you have a certain amount of budget in terms of points or money or whatever you want to call it. And you have to build various types of defensive things on that pathway. And it starts out easy with a smaller number of, creatures. But then they come more of them, and then they come faster. And so you have to decide, well, if I use something to slow them down here, and then I put 3 of these machine guns on this spot, I should be able to get most of them. But if some of them get through, then... So basically, it's a progressively harder game of planning in advance and laying out your defenses. And it can be very addictive. But the one thing that Fortnite has that was just immediately obvious to me is it's essentially Minecraft with guns. Now, Minecraft was absolutely enormous, and needless to say, I never got into Minecraft. I think Minecraft is, on some level, an exceedingly simple game, a simple-minded game almost. Where you basically, and the whole thing's done in blocks. It's designed to look like it's those 8-bit games like Space Invaders. And in Minecraft, you run around with a pickaxe and you start chopping up things and you get some resources. Then you build things, and you build houses, and you run around and chop around other things. And it's mostly building things. And so it appeals to people. And grown-ups or people with way too much time on their hands have done some amazing things. Somebody built a life-size Starship Enterprise in Minecraft. I mean, they spent a year or something on it. And they built it's true to scale. You walk up to the thing and it's just like, it's the size of 2 or 3 city blocks. So Minecraft was enormously popular back, I want to say, around 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. So they've taken Minecraft and mixed it with tower defense and mixed it with first-person shooters, and there's a little bit of the Candy Crush kind of thing. They've taken all of these things that work, and I don't know the details of it, but I'm sure it's one of these games where you get the app for free, but if you want extra points or extra this or that, you pay cash, and people are running up $1,000 bills for these things. And there you go. A good question, Eric. It's Enterprise. I think it might have been Enterprise D. Anyway, now this particular game is an intentional perfect storm of all of these addictive qualities, and I admire the developers, certainly from a business sense. I suspect they knew what they were doing in terms of what this effect would be, but we're still in very, very early stages of this. But it feels to me, listening to what I'm hearing about Fortnite, I feel like a cop in the late 80s in inner city when somebody mentioned something called crack cocaine. What the hell's crack cocaine? It's cocaine and it's dirt cheap and you don't have to freebase it and you don't have to sniff it. It's just a rock and you smoke it in a pipe and it's a tremendously powerful hit. Really? Yeah. And I feel like one of those cops who've heard about this crack cocaine thing and starting to see just a few outlying cases of it. And I often think about this and think this could be very, very bad because it appears to be an intentionally refined super nicotine, weapons grade nicotine. And these kids have enough problems staying in the real world as it is. But Cindy, the answer is what do we do about it is we stop tolerating it. And the sooner we stop tolerating it, the better it'll be for us and the better it'll be for them too. They've got a world of growing up to do, and many of them won't. They won't. It's too late. In many cases, they simply don't have the emotional substrata that adult people have, and it's a catastrophe, and it's going to get a lot worse. And we're going to see it. It worries the daylights out of me. John Gwaltzka. I think I'm pretty sure I got the John right anyway. Hi, John. What are your thoughts on the OIG report? Mine are, that'd be the Office of Inspector General. Mine are that neither Hillary or Comey nor Strusk or anyone else will ever see justice for their part in the worst political scandals in U.S. history, and the fetid swamp that is D.C. will remain undrained in perpetuity. I'm inclined to want to agree with you on this. I think I mentioned last week or the week before, I still occasionally wake up with this, half awake, half asleep thing in the morning, thinking, oh, maybe what's going to happen is I'll turn on the TV and there will be Sessions, and I'll be reading a list of indictments that he's been working on intensely and in complete secrecy for the last 18 months or 2 years or whatever, but it's not going to happen. Somebody just Puddle Pirate says this damaged generation votes, and that's something that I think needs to be said too. This damaged generation does vote, and this generation was damaged intentionally in order to get the voting result they wanted. This is what the left does. They will rule over the ruins. They don't care if inner city America's lives are destroyed. They don't care if Black America disintegrates. They don't care if 8,000 Black people are murdered every year. They say they care, but they don't. What matters is that they get the votes. And if that means turning adults into children or not letting them ever become adults so that they vote like children, which means vote Democrat, then that's what they'll do. The morality of it is so reprehensible and disgusting that every time one of these people tries to take the moral high ground with me, it's just like I'm like a pit bull, on the chain. Just let me loose. I'm going to tear these people up. Anyway, back to John's question. John, the thing with Hillary is not just that Hillary Clinton broke the law, and it's not just that she got away with it. What Hillary Clinton did was she broke the rule of law. She broke the idea of the rule of law. We all cooperated in the society because we had the quaint idea, true once, that no matter how much money we had or how well off or how badly off we were, how powerful or how helpless, that the law applied equally to everybody. Not so naive to say that if I got in trouble and I had a good lawyer versus a bad lawyer, I would do better with the good lawyer. That's absolutely true. But nevertheless, the law was the law, and the law applied to everybody the same. When somebody can commit felonies and treasons on the scale of Hillary Clinton and get away with it, the half of the country that voted for her has no respect for the law anyway. They're the kind of people who, if you can change an election result after the fact, do it. If you can change the voting rules to get your person in, do it. And then if it helps a Republican after that, change it back and then change it back again. They don't have any sense of integrity or any sense of playing by the rules. They're ours. So they don't care. And the problem for the country is that the people who do care about the rule of law still are becoming convinced that that it simply just doesn't exist anymore. Because this woman's the scale of Hillary and Bill and Chelsea's felonies and misdemeanors is so overwhelming. I mean, put Hillary Clinton, just if you can find a hole deep enough and well sealed enough, just put Hillary Clinton aside for a minute. That's what we ought to do with Yucca Mountain, by the way. Yucca Mountain is where we ought to inter the Clintons so that they don't poison another generation, for 200,000 years until their half-life is reached or whatever the case may be, because they're such toxic, horrible people. But put aside all the things we know that Hillary did. It's just open knowledge that the Clinton Foundation is a criminal enterprise. But even put that aside, the Clinton Foundation raised something like $100 million, and somebody saw their tax returns. And the Clinton Foundation, I think, raised $60-70 million in 1 year. And of that $70 million that this charitable tax-free organization raised, $70 million, something like $4 million went to charities. In other words, $4 million out of the $70 million that they raised went to the purpose it was intended to go to, at least what they claimed it to. It all went to the purpose it was intended to go to, except for that $7 million, because the intention of the Clinton Foundation was to raise money tax-free to enrich the Clintons. And since they have no standards of any kind whatsoever, I have not been able to detect any moral standards among any of the three of them. Not at all. You can make yourself a fairly tidy living if you are in a position of power earned from a lifetime of scheming and backbiting and destroying enemies, destroying reputations, destroying emotional lives, destroying people's families. And in many cases, I have to say, statistically, as a person who's dead set against conspiracy theories and exceedingly skeptical of them, nevertheless, the number of people who stumble into strange accidental deaths after revealing or about to reveal something of the Clintons is higher than I think any reasonable statistician would be willing to grant. So I suspect you could make a fairly compelling case that there's some actual murder going on back there. Certainly the appearance of it. And I think there's no question about the rape. There's absolutely no question about the embezzlement, about the lying, about perjury, about treason. All of that's just open. And when they walk, it tells all of the little people, that'd be us, that you can get away with murder and everything else if you're a Democrat, if you pay the right people. And I have to say, I've been so impressed with Donald Trump his foreign policy, the economy, unemployment's lower than it's been in 44 years. I think the way he handled this Kim thing is just absolute genius. And there's a number of excellent things you can say about him, including his tax cuts, which restarted the economy. Obama said there's no magic button you can just push, to restart the economy. Turns out there is. And turns out you know it because we've been telling you about it, and you've already admitted, Obama, before he was elected, that even if he could be proven to him that lowering the tax rate would actually increase federal revenues, he didn't want to do it. He said the most important thing is to level the playing fields, get the rich. So, when I look at Trump and look at the things he's done, I'm so impressed. And yet, the signal failure so far, and he better hurry, because you're going to need the House and the Senate for this, is I have not seen any, of all the people that Donald Trump should have fired first, I would have fired Jeff Sessions within a month. Because I didn't see anything. I don't see anything that Jeff Sessions has done at all. And I keep thinking, he's all in secret. He's all preparing the case. I suspect not. But Comey is a lunatic. He's just kind of a psychopath. And you hear of FBI agents sending texts to other FBI agents saying that they're going to use the power of the FBI to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get elected. We were just 70,000 votes away a year and a half ago from having Hillary Clinton's sensible shoes on our neck for the next 1,000 years. So we have a limited amount of time to do this. I thought we were going to get shellacked in November. And I still think that's likely, but not as likely and not as bad, because despite the best efforts of the news media and entertainment, the whole thing, I don't have to go through this litany again. Despite their frantic, hysterical efforts, people are aware of the fact that this is the best economy in 44 years, and they're aware of the fact that they can get jobs where they didn't before, and they're aware of the fact that their businesses are making more money. They're taking home more money as employees. And all the things they hate about Trump and being just such an idiot and so nasty and vulgar, it's a little confusing to these people when they find out that, Donald Trump, who's apparently such a, vulgar, crass, incompetent, managed to bring the Olympics to the United States when Obama specifically went on a trip to do it and didn't get it. He got the World Cup to the Olympics. He seems to have ended the Korean War, certainly put it down the path of that. He backed Iran out of the deal that was going to guarantee them nuclear weapons, put them on notice. You may remember ISIS. That name was on our lips quite a bit during the last 8 years. I don't hear much about them anymore, and that's because they largely don't exist anymore. Far be it for me to be the kind of person who says, we don't have to worry about that. That problem's beaten now. No. ISIS is, and Al-Qaeda and all the rest of these things, these organizations are like rust. They'll never go away. Rust never sleeps, and you have to mow the grass. And if you don't, then you get weeds. But certainly, ISIS is not the threat it used to be when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and Barack Obama was president. I was talking about this with my wife last night. We were talking about this whole thing and how the President of the United States, it's on record, and certainly one of our viewers knows the inside details of what goes on at CENTCOM because he got me into CENTCOM. It took them half an hour to sanitize the place before I came in, meaning, making sure there was nothing secret on the screens and all the rest of it. But that was nothing compared to after I left. It took them 2.5 hours to sanitize the place after I left, because of the smell and all the spill food and everything. But when the President of the United States gets a call from the people on the ground, the commander of CENTCOM. CENTCOM's where all the action is. CENTCOM used to be the waste paper basket that you threw all the people with no careers into, but now everything is happening in the world happens at CENTCOM, Central Command. It's based in Tampa. And it deals with Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran and Israel, I think, all the rest of it. So, ISIS is growing. more and more powerful. They're murdering people everywhere. They're just simply slaughtering people by the scores, putting people in cages and setting them on fire, lining up 25, 30 people in orange jumpsuits on a beach, slitting all their throats, all of this stuff. And when these charming people decide that they're going to take a convoy of trucks with oil that they've stolen, and they're going to run 150 trucks to some port, someplace, probably Basra, I don't know that for a fact, but they're going to take the oil to sell it so they can buy more guns and explosives so they can kill more people in nightclubs in Brussels and Paris. And the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, gets a call that says, "Sir, we have eyes on a convoy, 150 strong. It's going to be on the road for 3 or 4 hours. It's moving. This is what our entire military is built for. We are here for this." The A-10 and our ground assets, Apache helicopters, all of these things are designed to destroy tanks and motorized vehicles. That's what the U.S. military is built to do, destroy motorized vehicles. And there's 150 of them, and they're heading for the Gulf, and they're out in the open, and we got them cold. Let's pull the trigger, why don't we? And the word comes from the President of the United States. Well, I guess we can, but to be fair, we should give them some warning. We need to give them 45 minutes warning. Warn them that in 45 minutes we're going to attack. I can't imagine what that must have looked like at CENTCOM. I know somebody who can imagine it, but I don't know what that must look like if you're an actual warfighter in uniform to hear that come down. How does that work? Am I supposed to call the ISIS hotline? Am I supposed to, do they have a phone number like that special number you call into radio stations so that you can be the interviewee, not the regular line? Who the hell do you call to give ISIS a warning? But true enough, it's actually true. It happened many times. The strikes were either called off or they were said you have to give them a warning. And when they get them a warning, guess what happens to the convoy? The convoy disperses. All the trucks go in separate directions, and then they just take them out slowly, or they wait till some other time and they get the money they need to do the murdering they want to. And that's Barack Obama. And then what was it, day 2? 2 or 3 was certainly within the first week. There's a known ISIS group in, might have been Al-Qaeda, I suspect it was ISIS. There's a bunch of ISIS guys in a bunch of caves up in Afghanistan, up in the hills. Why don't we use some thermobaric bombs on them, Commander-in-Chief? You know, the kind of things that suck the air out of the tunnels and then light it on fire? And this time, the President of the United States, in conjunction with the Secretary of Defense, Mad Dog Mattis, which is the exact precise nickname you want for a Secretary of Defense, and I've been saying that for 10 years now. When you have a Secretary of Defense whose nickname is Mad Dog, you are in secure hands, and your country is as safe as it's going to be. So somebody along the line said, you know, Mr. President, we certainly have the munitions to deal with this little problem. As a matter of fact, we've got a lot more munition than we have holes in the mountainside, sir. You want to explain that to me? We actually have a weapon that is much more powerful than the one that we need to use to do the job. What is this weapon called? It's called the Massive Ordnance Airburst Device Bomb. Massive Ordnance Air. It's MOAB, and it's also known as the mother of all bombs. It's a giant canister. It's enormous. It's so big they can't launch it from bombers. They have to push it out the back of a C-130 Hercules transport. It's this enormous, enormous cylinder, and it comes out of the back of the transport. It's got a couple steering vanes on it and a GPS device. Not that you have to get terribly, terribly close to your target when you're dropping the mother of all bombs. And what happens is, as this thing comes down in the ground, hits the ground, but instead of exploding, what it does is it ruptures that enormous tank of its that it's got and pushes out this mixture of essentially propane. It's flammable gas. And there's a delayed fuse there so that the bomb hits, the flammable gas expands into this huge area, and then that's ignited. And it is the largest non-nuclear weapon we have in the arsenal. We said it was the largest non-nuclear weapon in the world, but the Russians, of course, and I know some Russians, can't let America have the biggest bomb in the world, so they basically say that they have the father of all bombs, which presumably has twice the yield or 40% more yield than the mother of all bombs. And I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if they've ever tested it or not, but I know that the Moab works because I saw the one film footage that they did back in the mid-2000s when they first invented it, and then I saw what's left of that hill after they used it on these people. So why am I diverging down this long, long story? Well, when you give ISIS 45 minutes warning that you're going to attack them, ISIS gets stronger every day. When you decide to use the most massive weapon we have that's not a nuclear weapon, and essentially smash mosquitoes with a sledgehammer, you are saying to them, this is not the game that you were playing before, and the rules are different now, and you're not going to like this new game. And that's why, over the last 18 months, we've not heard much from ISIS. You know why we haven't heard much from ISIS? The answer is because there's not many ISIS left anymore. And the reason there's not much ISIS left anymore is because the extraordinarily capable people who deal with ISIS on a daily basis finally had their hands untied and were allowed to do their jobs. And if the President of the United States had untied the hands of his military when he became Commander-in-Chief, there'd be people in Brussels and Paris and a number of other places, Africa, school children, who would be alive today because ISIS would not have become as strong as they would, because ISIS was strong because people thought you could basically tweak the nose of the great Satan and get away with it. Once they find out you can't get away with it, the number of recruitment drives you need goes way up. It's astonishing how few people you get when it turns into sudden death instead of glory. So, this is all not just the Clintons. It's the left. They are for lawlessness in every form. They have no. You used to be able to disagree with Democrats about policy, but honestly, I don't. This modern progressive group, this Saul Alinsky group, I don't know what their core beliefs are because I just don't think they have any. I think if Hillary Clinton could have been president, and she was sure she would have been president by running as a conservative Republican, she would have done it in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Yes, we did have fuel air explosives at the end of Vietnam, but Ayoyas. But yeah, the daisy cutter bomb you drop in the middle of the forest canopy, and it would do the same thing, but it had a radius of, I don't know, 50 meters, something like that, maybe a little more. But this thing is basically a daisy cutter made large. So the lesson of this is, I think you're right, John. I don't think the Clintons are going to go to jail. I don't think Obama's going to go to jail. And because they don't go to jail, their philosophy does not get discredited the way it needs to be discredited, which means it will happen again. We'll get it again. If we'd had the sense to go in and prosecute these people and get convictions against them, my feeling would have been the smart thing to do would have been get convictions on Hillary Clinton, get felony convictions on her and Bill Clinton. It's what I would do if I was President Trump. I would get felony convictions. I'd get them arrested. I'd get the mugshots. I would get them. I'd make them do the perp walk. I would get them convicted. I'd get them sentenced. And once they were sentenced as president, I would not pardon them. I would commute their sentence. I think we talked about this last week. Because half the country voted for her and you know, do it for them. So it's not for the Clintons. The Clintons deserve to be in jail forever. For the millions and millions and millions of honest Americans who voted for Hillary Clinton, who were unaware of these crimes, we've decided to commute her sentence because we don't think it's fair for you, for the person who you worked so hard for, to be in jail. We're not doing it for her. We're doing it for the half of the American people that she swindled. And the one thing I can say about Hillary Clinton, John, before we move on, is as much as I would like to see that woman in prison, I become more and more convinced that Hillary Clinton is in perfect hell right now. That it is that if Hillary Clinton had been locked up, she'd have a martyr complex and she'd be made into Joan of Arc and all the rest of it. But the fact that she lost an election that was, to the progressive mind, unimaginable to lose, And the fact that 18 months after the fact, she still can't get over it and still talks about how she won more hairdressers, let's say, than Donald Trump did, means to me that from the moment mid to late afternoon on that 1st November of 2016, first Tuesday in November, from that instant, when she began to, wait a minute, hold on now, what's this? And then within an hour, she's like, we're in actual trouble here. And then she started drinking, which is why she didn't come out. She was roaring drunk, sent out John Podesta. From that moment, she's been in the kind of hell that only people with that kind of ego can be in. People with genuine humility and character can't be in the kind of agony of rage that Hillary Clinton is in. I'm sure Mitt Romney wasn't happy about losing. I'm sure Mitt Romney was surprised and somewhat depressed about losing the election. He put a lot of work into it. But I don't suspect that it destroyed Mitt Romney. But Hillary Clinton she was bonkers to begin with. The woman's barking mad. Barking mad, insane, absolute psychopath, and has enormous health problems. We don't know what they are, but enormous physical problems. Our friend Merlin Wendelbo is back, and he says, it seems we conservatives are mostly concerned with freedom to do whatever we want as long as it does not inhibit the freedom of others, whereas liberals are concerned with freedom from frisbees, noise, work, responsibility, the rights of others, and so on. What are your thoughts on this? And might it make a firewall topic? It might. And what if I were to tell you this, Merlin? What if I were to turn that around completely and say that you say conservatives are the ones who want the freedom to and that liberals want the freedom from? What if I were to say to you that it's the progressives who want to be able to tax people, to control their lives, to tell them what to eat, what to wear, how fast to drive, where to live, how much money they can spend, how much electricity they can spend, all of that? While it's conservatives who want to be free from other people's interference, free from government intrusion, free from ridiculous taxation, free from all of these things. So I don't know if the to and the from thing is really quite as neat or sanitary as it may look. The more interesting question is, I think, and I know what you're reaching for, and not just reaching for. I know what you're saying, and you're right about one thing. We have different views of what freedom is. I think you nailed it in that first sentence of yours. We see freedom as something that applies to humanity, and that as a member of humanity, I want the same freedom as everybody else, but I don't much care what those people do with their freedom. It doesn't really matter to me. It only matters when it affects my freedom. It's a terrible, hoary old saw, but it's the best I've ever heard. Your freedom to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. So we look at freedom as something that is a quality that all people can share, and the idea of freedom is, if you want to do something, that's great. You want to dress up like a French maid, that's fine. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Fine. But they don't think that way. For them, freedom means freedom from responsibility. The kind of freedom that progressives are talking about is the kind of freedom that they espouse for, what's his name? Almost said Milos Forman, but that's not it. My memory is not what it was, especially not today. Hang on a second. It's going to come up in the comment section. I just don't want the satisfaction happening. Hang on. Again, I've got the face right in front of me. Roman Polanski. That's the kind of freedom that progressives want. They want the Roman Polanski freedom. They want the freedom to do whatever they want to, do whatever drugs they want to do whatever sexual activities they want to, spend whatever money they want to, and get away with it and not have to pay a price. They not only want the freedom of action, which we want, but I think the thing that really motivates them is they don't just want to be free from the restraints of morality. They want to live in a world where those restraints of morality don't exist. And that's a subtle difference, but it's a really critical one. So what I'm saying is, it's not just that they want to be able to get away with behaviors that most people consider immoral. They certainly want that. They also want to live in a world where the entire idea of immorality doesn't exist. And you would ask yourself, why is that? Right? I mean, look, if you could get away with whatever you want to, and you granted that to somebody, people like you and I would say, really, well, then I guess I'll do what I want to do. I don't much care about other people. But they're so insecure, they're so emotionally crippled, that not only do they want to be able to do whatever they want to, they cannot bear the fact that other people are behaving to a higher standard than they are. And they can't bear the fact that other people are capable of resisting temptations that they can't resist. So therefore, let's eliminate all restrictions on everything. And that way we can all be as loathsome as I am as a progressive. That way, if everybody can do whatever they want to, then everybody is as morally reprehensible as I am, and then I don't feel so bad. I think I talked about this, was it last week or week before, where I was at a party in my senior year, and everybody's passing a joint around, and I just said, no, thanks. And it wasn't like, how dare you? It was, no, I just, no, thanks. And that just put a stop on the evening. And everybody pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, because I had to actually take a hit on this joint, because if I didn't understand why. I really, honestly, I was like, what is the big deal here, guys? Just, no, okay, thank you, no. Why? Well, because somebody was making a stand. Not to make a stand, and not to lecture anybody or wag any, or I'm going to call the cops. No, it's not for me. Knock yourself out. That kind of thing drives them nuts, and so that can't be allowed. And that's what's interesting too, Merlin, if you think about it, this really is an interesting point. They don't just want to be free of morality, they want to destroy morality, whether it applies to them or not. Which is why the whole thing with the wedding cake is such an interesting example, right? It's not just that these people could have gotten another cake. The idea that there is somebody out there in the world, or somebody within their reach anyway, who has a religious belief that goes against their moral code or their personal experience, whatever the case, whatever their moral code isn't. But if there's a person out there ready to make a stand for a religious belief, that person has to be destroyed. Because not only do they disagree with the decision to not bake the cake, they disagree that he should have had a choice in the first place. In other words, he should not have had a chance to make a moral decision. It should have been simply preordained that he will be forced to do these things. This is the world they want to live in. It's perfect. I've heard it so many times that I don't know how you improve this sentence. Here's what the left wants. The left wants to live in a world where everything that is not forbidden is mandatory. Think about that for a second. Everything that is not forbidden is mandatory. What is that saying? That's saying there's no choice. There's no choice to do anything. There is no freedom. You either have to do this or you cannot do this. There's no middle ground. These things you cannot do, and these things you must do, and there's nothing left. Every single action and every single decision falls into either forbidden or mandatory. And this is the world they want. They want a world where people cannot make their own decisions because it bothers them on a childlike emotional level. It bothers them the same way. Yeah, have you ever seen that viral video of these two dogs, and this guy comes home, and it's been a while, but something's all torn up, and he's got these two dogs there, and he's looking at these dogs, and he says to the dogs, which one of you did it? and the one dog's just looking up and wagging its tail, and the other dog is looking away, and the dog can tell that the guy's angry. Did you tear it up, Simon? And what about you, Mark? Did you tear it up? And the dog looks away and starts howling, and its guilt is so obvious. It's hilarious, actually. I highly recommend it. It's very funny, but it's that obvious, you know. They know they're guilty, and they know that they've got no moral code. And on some level, on a major level, it bugs the living daylights out of them that somebody does have a moral code, and so that moral code has to be destroyed. Let's see. I think I can do, how about we do two more? Stephen Hallas. Hello, Stephen. An Eastern European co-worker once stated an observation, saying, quote, "I find it strange you let your kids drive vehicles," unquote. I believe referring to 16-year-old teens as being able to have driver licenses. He was also amazed at the choices we had when buying an automobile. Has Natasha ever mentioned anything like this, and what was her cultural shock revelation? It wasn't just Natasha who had cultural shock in this happy meeting. I had a fair amount of it too. So let me tell you about my cultural shock, and then I'll tell you about hers, at least as it appears to me. I was not one of these people who thought that in 2016, when we met, that Russia was essentially, the Russia of the Soviet times, where that old, was it a Wendy's ad where these, barrel-shaped babushkas come out in the same piece of burlap, and everybody goes, "Oh, very nice, very nice." I knew that Moscow was not what Moscow was in the 70s during last years of communism, but I had no idea that Moscow was the city that it is today in terms of it's spotlessly clean, it's completely lit up, it's beautifully maintained. It's simply astonishing. Pretty much brand new. Natasha sees a building that's 30, 40 years old, and she says, "This reminds me of the 90s in the Soviet Union when everything was old." Natasha was shocked by the fact that there were so many electrical cables. Walk down the street in Los Angeles, and you see these wooden telephone poles, and hanging from the wooden telephone poles are these wires, and she could never get over it. It was like, what the hell is this? She didn't say, "What the hell is this?" She says, this looks like the 18th century. I guess I never really thought about it before. You don't have those? No, our wires are all underground, and when they have to go above ground, they're on concrete pillars, time and time again. So it was shocking to me to see how advanced Moscow was in terms of its overall quality of living, in terms of things like public services and just general cleanliness, quality of roads, quality of mass transit, all that stuff. This is what happens when you take the entire wealth of a country and basically spend it in order to polish up a city. Not to sound defensive about it, it causes me constant shame, especially in Los Angeles. I'll get to that in a second. But if I was the president of the United States with dictatorial powers and I wanted to make New York sparkle, and I had $1 trillion to do it with, I could do that too. But nevertheless, that is a shock to me, was how modern and how sophisticated and how elegant and so on. The two things I think three things that struck my wife, I think, the most, none of them were things like, wow, look at the cars. They've got all kinds of cars in Moscow. They've got very, very nice Mercedes and BMWs. So it wasn't anything technological or shiny like that. In many ways, it's a shinier city than certainly it's a shinier city than mine. But there are a couple things that really did surprise her. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. The embarrassing ones, where she could not believe how poor the conditions of the airports and the roads were. She spent 3 hours in customs when we met in New York City at JFK. At JFK, I remember being a boy going to fly in and out of JFK in 1963-64. It was the first modern airport. The Pan Am terminal at John F. Kennedy International is ancient and decaying now, and there's millions of buildings like it. But at the time, the Pan Am terminal in whenever it was built, 63, 64, early 60s at JFK, was the first of these modern airport buildings. shaped like kind of a top of a potato, and it's all wide open areas. It was revolutionary. I remember walking in there, it was like, oh my God, that was 1963. I went to Thailand in 2012, and the airport looked like it was built by Vulcans 300 years in the future and sent back in time. And I was ashamed of LAX and ashamed of John F. Kennedy. Then in the case of Thailand, I got about 10 minutes outside of the airport, and then all of a sudden I realized, okay, well, there's a guy in a rice paddy with a cloth around his waist whipping a buffalo. And that's their house, that shack made out of corrugated tin and plastic bags. So I felt a little better after that. So the overall quality of that is low. There's a happy story here, happier kind of a tale to this story. So she was shocked at how run down JFK was. New York City impressed her enormously because New York City, despite the fact that it's actually a very filthy city, is an incredible place. It's an amazing place. It's an absolutely magical place to spend 3 or 4 days. And any longer than that, you're going to lose your mind. But New York City is not just a sparks coming. Best thing I ever heard about New York City, by the way, was by Sam Shepard, the playwright who I like very much. Good actor, too. He died not too long ago. He was played the general in Black Hawk Down, and he played Chuck Yeager in The Right Stuff. But Sam Shepard was a playwright before he was an actor, and 30 years ago, something like that, so 40 years ago. Sam Shepard said the first time he was ever in New York City, he'd come from wherever he was in Texas or whatever. He said he was walking down the streets of New York City. He'd just taken some mescaline. He had on his cowboy hat and his cowboy boots, and he said when he looked down, he could see sparks flying off of his heels every time his feet touched the pavement. And I thought, man, that is New York. When New York is jumping in the fall, when it's nice, not cold, but crisp, that town has an electricity that no place else has, that I've been to. So she liked New York, but when she got off the plane in Los Angeles, she simply couldn't believe it. She was just dumbstruck. She couldn't speak. It was like she didn't want to keep talking about it, but all she could see was just the trash everywhere. And the freeways here are third world freeways. And this is Los Angeles. It's the town that everybody knows around the world. This is where all of the TV shows and all the movies are made. This is where the glamour capital of the world is. And it's appalling. And to come to Los Angeles and expect to see this magical place and see nothing but just trash everywhere on the side of all the freeways and the exit ramps just lined with trash. And then we go to this great place downtown, and you have to go through entire cities of homeless people. There's 60 tents underneath one overpass, and it looks like, and she says to me, this is worse than Cairo. This is worse than Istanbul. And it's embarrassing. And it really isn't. It's embarrassing and it's shameful. Now, after we'd been in Los Angeles for a couple months, she came with me because she goes to pretty much all the events I do, and it makes my life so much different, so much better. But somewhere 2 or 3 months after she arrived permanently, I had a speaking event in Orange County, and we started driving south, and then all of a sudden the road suddenly got smooth, and everything was landscaped, and all the buildings were new, and she looked around astonished, and she just said, what happened? What happened? We're in Orange County now. That place was governed by Democrats. This place is governed by Republicans. The roads are spotless and they're beautifully, perfectly maintained, and all of the buildings are new, and there's no trash anywhere because it's run by Republicans. And I'm happy to say that everywhere we've been since then, I think without exception, was far, 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 far cleaner than Los Angeles. We've been to Illinois, Minnesota, Florida. We've been to Idaho, driven a bit through Washington State, Nevada, Arizona. That's just so far, and I'm probably missing a couple. And all of them are nicer than Los Angeles. So that was took a bit of the edge off of it. Made at least realize how localized it is. But yeah, if you're not prepared for it, it's quite a shock. So there was that. The part I'm happy to report about is, and this is the thing I'm actually proudest about in a weird sort of way. I don't have to, I don't, you know, the 90s in Russia were such a traumatic time that communism had fallen and the economy collapsed and there was nothing but, it was a kleptocracy, just nothing but gangs taking over the communists had, in many cases the same person. And it was brutal. The 90s were brutal in Russia, brutal. And so anytime she sees something older or, when I say old, I don't mean decrepit, I mean just older. She has this very strong reaction to it. And I don't have that reaction. So, and by the way, I know what the flags on the moon look like, so I'm not too insecure about the whole technology thing and so on. But the trash bothered me because I'd never seen it before, really. The thing that I'm proudest of, we noticed on the first night back in Los Angeles. I used to live right across the street from Whole Foods, believe it or not, and would walk across the street there. And we went grocery shopping, and again, this is a great thing about being married to a foreigner, is you see your country in completely different eyes. We went to Whole Foods, and we got a bunch of stuff, and we're checking out, and it's a typical, absolutely normal experience that all of us have had. You show up in the line's moving pretty fast, and maybe one person in front of you or something. And the cashier gets to you and say, "Hey, how are you? Did you find everything you need?" "Yeah, I did. Thanks. How are you?" "Good. I'm good. How are you?" "I'm fine." "Hey, that's a nice shirt you're wearing there." "Thank you very much. How's it going with you?" Just kind of thing. And they're bagging your groceries. And Natasha's staring at this with her mouth open. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. And I didn't realize it until after we were out of there. As we were leaving, she's just knocked on the head. So what's up? What's the matter? I can't believe what I just saw. What? I really just didn't know what it was. Everybody's so polite. A lot of Europeans come here and think that's fake, by the way. I remember when even 35, 40 years ago when I was in college, there was a group visiting from, where were they from? Someplace. Might have been the Netherlands. Netherlands or Belgium, I think. Anyway, there was a bunch of theatrical students came to visit our school for a while. They were touring the United States, and we kind of took care of them. We took them to Oaks Mall. And they were convinced that everybody saying, "Hey, how are you?" Good. They thought it was just 100% a script designed to get their money. They could not understand that people were actually this friendly. They thought they were suspicious of it. Natasha says Russians would be suspicious of it. Nobody's friendly. Nobody smiles. Nobody helps anybody out. And she said something that was just so touching to me, And she said, "I always wanted to live in a place where people were friendly. I always wanted to be nice to people. I try to be nice to people. But where I come from, if you're nice to people, you're either an idiot or you're running a con." And as far as bagging the groceries go, they don't. They just push it. You get it in a bag, not their problem. So virtually all the time we go out, the quality of service, just the everyday, simple, fundamental experience of going shopping and things like that still amazes her. It amazes her that people are friendly. It amazes her that people are talking to each other, joking in line. It amazes her that she'll walk into a restaurant or a supermarket and somebody she'd never seen before. So that's a lovely dress you're wearing. She's just gobsmacked by it. And I just beaming with pride. But I think the thing that she was probably most impressed by, I'm not speaking for her, I'm going to find out the facts in probably in half an hour. But I think the thing that was most impressive to her, and you'll all love this because I certainly did. And by the way, somebody said, who was it? Friday 63, Natasha, if you think it's friendly here or in Idaho, wait till you go to the South. It's just, there are elements of the South that are just shockingly friendly, almost unbelievable. Anyway, the thing I think that probably had the most visceral impact on her was taking her shooting. When we went out She shot a 9mm, and it was never fired a weapon at all before. I was on a private range, and it wasn't really exactly a fun experience because it was in a very small underground room, very small. So there's a lot of not just sound in there, there's a pretty strong concussion in there. But we took her to an outdoor range, and I rented a 22 pistol, and she took to that like I've never seen anybody take to it. She loved it so much that I bought her a 22 pistol. I bought her a Beretta. And she is such an astonishingly good shot that within 3 weeks she was out shooting the pistol. She was better than the pistol was. She was. The pistol sights were not as good as her aim was. So I got her a Buckmark 22 target pistol, which she is unbelievably good at. Unbelievably good shot. Much better than me. And every time I say that, she said, "Oh, no, you're a better shot." I'm not, though. I'm not. And I don't have to be. I'm a good enough shot. I'm a decent shot. She's astonishing. She's absolutely astonishing. And it's because she's been a photographer for 25, 30 years, and she shoots with a depth of field that's a couple of, half an inch deep. She's using lenses wide open, and her focal plane is so narrow that she's got to hold this thing rock solid to get enough of an exposure, to get enough light through there to get this thing the way she wanted. Maybe it's not wide open, maybe it's fully closed. I don't remember. But in any event, narrow depth of field, so she has to hold these things rock steady and close one eye, and she's just naturally suited for it. But it's not just the fact that she had a lot of fun shooting. And by the way, for the first, I want to say 4 or 5 months, we were going to the range every weekend. Natasha was shooting probably between 600 and 1,000 rounds a week. And just deadly. We were just up at Oak Tree this last weekend to get my formerly illegal AR-15, now fully illegal, which makes me very, very happy. I don't have to get that ridiculous gun stock. And by the way, that featureless AR-15 thing, the thing that got rid of the pistol grip, was everywhere. And then along came this little magic device that I talk about in my right angle if you haven't seen it yet. And you don't even see those things anymore, those horrible, ugly things that are attached by 3 screws, and you could be removed in probably 20 seconds. So, anyway, it wasn't just the fact that shooting was fun. I could see that the fact that she was not only allowed, but at least in the circles that I travel in, strongly encouraged to be able to do this, to go out and do it, have fun, that there were social clubs, women's shooting clubs, all of it. I think when she realized, she actually held that thing in her hand, and she realized, I think on some level, that this is the difference between free people and slaves. That this is the difference. And that, I don't have to tell you this, all of our rights are protected by that right. And I think Natasha finally understood America as a result of a very kind of innocuous sort of throwaway line I had. It was a very, very powerful moment for both of us. And I mentioned this in the right angle, I think, as well. So in Moscow, as in many other places in the world, Britain certainly now, and virtually everywhere else. In Moscow, in this beautifully run, clean city, when you go to your apartment, the door is made out of steel, and there's probably 4 or 5 beefy deadbolts, And that's because people will break down your door and they'll beat you up or knife you and take your stuff. And when we got to my apartment, when we first moved here, she saw this one little tiny little deadbolt, and she was just shocked, But then when we moved to the house that we're renting, it's got this decorative glasswork around the door. And we were coming home, and it's got a tiny little, almost like a dollhouse deadbolt. And a regular lock on the door. And we were coming in one night, and she looked at this tiny little lock, and she said, "Billy, how is this going to keep anybody out? I mean, this glass is just you're right through it. How is this going to keep people out of here? How do you feel safe behind this?" And I said, honey, the glass is not here to keep people out. The glass is there to wake me up. It's the gun that keeps people out. And she just, doink, light bulb went off in her head, which means she's far, far, far smarter. Not that I didn't know this in advance, but she's far, 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 far smarter than people who've lived here for 40 years who still can't figure that out. Still can't figure it out. The house can have, and by the way, everybody, and Natasha as well, for most of the history of this country, you didn't even need the deadbolt. Most people, for most of the time in America, up until the 60s when liberals started to take over, most people didn't lock their cars and they didn't lock their houses. They just didn't. You would park at the supermarket and you'd leave your keys in the car. And you'd walk in, get your stuff, and you'd come back. You'd go home, you'd close the door. What do you need to lock the door for? It wasn't that people were lazy, it just never occurred to them to have to lock the door. This was what most of America was like. And the reason it was like that was because pretty much everybody understood that if you go through somebody's door in the middle of the night without asking permission, you're likely to encounter something you're not going to want to see. And if you get, and if it turns out you don't get shot, but you get caught, you're going to be punished. And if you hurt somebody, you'll be killed. You'll be executed. You'll hang, or you get the electric chair or something. It's amazing how that works, really, when you get right down to it. And people lived in a situation that's so free of fear compared to today. So I would say those are the main things. Stephen, we'll do one more. Yeah. Jake Sorticus. How can we heal in-party rifts like Milo versus Shapiro and Yaf versus TPUSA Kirk? I don't know whether the Milo Shapiro thing has heated up recently. I know that they don't get along, and that that Ben feels that I'm paraphrasing. This is just what it looks like on the surface. I haven't talked to either one of them. I don't know Milo at all. I know Ben relatively well. Milo, I think everybody who's in the business looked at the kind of splash Milo was making, what was it, a year ago, maybe a little more. I mean, he was just everywhere. And he was the entire face of the conservative movement. And while I guess there might have been some anti-gay aspect to it, I think most of the people who felt some resentment at this wasn't that he was gay, probably on the contrary. I think most people thought that Milo is loving the spotlight, but is not exactly a champion of these ideas in terms of his ability to defend them. He was just the kind of guy who likes a fight, likes the attention, likes the spotlight, likes to be in a fight. And he would call the left out, and we really liked that because it was somebody fighting back, fearlessly fighting back. Ben, on the other hand, is probably, Ben Shapiro may be the second most educated person I know. Now, Milo, of course, saw Ben as, a never Trumper. Milo was deep in the whole Trump thing, and Ben was a negative, on Trump and so on. And there was a lot of actual nastiness going on behind the scenes. So I wouldn't say that's opened up into actual warfare. I don't know. I don't know where that stands. I do know that this is rumor. I haven't seen the check. My understanding is that Milo had, when everything caved in on him. And by the way, as a victim of slander myself, I'm going to say a victim. I don't feel like I'm a victim, but I have been pretty basely slandered and libeled in the past. I'm pretty sensitive to these kind of things. Milo has said a bunch of things that are pretty out there, and he's certainly said and done things a lot of people find reprehensible. But the thing that he said that got him destroyed was pretty much the opposite of what he said. They got him. They basically shut him down, and CPAC dropped him, and the publisher dropped him, and everybody dropped him because they say he came out in favor of child pornography. Essentially, he's saying, that he's in favor of sex with underage people, and that's not what he said at all. He said that he had a relationship a sexual relationship when he was 16, and that your ability to deal with that varies by individual. I couldn't agree with that more. And I hated seeing him destroyed over something that he didn't say at all. He wasn't saying, no, I think it's great that homosexual men have sexual relationships with underage boys. He wasn't saying that at all. He was saying he had one. It was his choice. And at 16, I suspect Milo Yiannopoulos at 16 is more mature than most of the people on the left are going to be when they're 100. Or if they live that long, they're going to die of an overdose of butter, it looks like sometimes. But he was more mature, I'm sure, at 16. Had seen more of the world and more capable of making a decision like that than most millennials are at any age, and certainly much more advanced and sophisticated in that particular way than I was at that age, or anybody that we know likely. So anyway, he disappeared, and he didn't ask for my advice. I don't know him, but he did what I think was advised to him, which is just walk away, disappear for a while. It's just hell right now. It'll blow over. Walk away fast, come back slowly. And my understanding is that either before he left or while he was gone, he raised $12 million. That is a lot of that's a lot of money. I don't know that that's true, but it's a lot of money. So now he has his radio show, or his webcast, I guess, and I haven't seen him. He's not in the picture anymore that I can see. Ben is. Ben is winning converts, and Prager's doing better and better, and Jordan Peterson's a kind of a new arrival on the political scene. He's moving a lot of minds and stuff. So I don't think that's an open warfare. And as far as TPUSA versus Young Americans for Freedom, I saw a memo prepared by Young Americans for Freedom that had some choice arguments against TPUSA. And all I will say about that is I work for TPUSA. I've been employed by them. I don't know anything about the truth of these allegations or whatsoever. I don't know anything about it. I know that organization is doing a lot of good, and I know Charlie is a terrific fundraiser and is making a difference. But the YAF memo basically said that TPUSA was grossly overinflating their membership, were basically hijacking other people's events and claiming credit for them and so on. And a lot of what was in the TPUSA memo looked like, in the YAF memo, a lot of it seemed pretty credible and relatively well evidenced, but I could detect a couple places there where it just seemed like they were reaching. And while YAF says that they have excellent relationships with every other young conservative group, there were a couple of places there where it seemed to me like that memo was reaching a little bit, that the charges that they were making were not really supported to the magnitude of the charge. They talked about being TPUSA having Nazi sympathies, where they had one quote from 3 individuals. One of them was, "I hate black people, I just hate them." And that they used, the YAF memo used that as evidence of TPUSA having Nazi ties or something. I don't know whether that email or message or text was in jest. I don't know if it was serious. And I don't know if it was a moment of frustration. But having had my words arranged and taken out of context, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. Eric Blake mentions Reagan had said that it's amazing what you can get done if you stop worrying about who gets the credit. He also had the 11th commandment, which was, thou shalt not criticize other conservatives in public. It's a big enough fight trying to fight the rust and the grass growing without having to constantly be fighting amongst ourselves. And I have to say that as a general rule, the conservative movement has been unbelievably united. I don't see a lot of I don't see any real bickering. I mean, I see occasional little, this is annoying, or I'm upset at this, but I don't see any like blood feuds or anything like this on this side of the aisle. If the biggest, internal strife is Milo versus Shapiro or YAF versus TPUSA, then this is a pretty well behaved and coherent kind of a thing. Yes, and George says that one of the complaints of the Young Americans for Freedom used in a couple places was that Charlie Kirk doesn't have a college degree and therefore, makes mistakes that he shouldn't be making because he's so young and inexperienced. I read that and I just thought, so what are you saying exactly? Yeah, if you're saying you need to go to the Harvard School of Government in order to be able to make commentary on American politics, because that would disqualify me. Wouldn't disqualify Ben Shapiro. He graduated from Harvard with honors, but I didn't. And that kind of elitist thing is the whole thing I think we're fighting. T-Dog Lie says a lot of people are getting mad at Candace Owens. I don't know if that means conservatives or not. Candace kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah. Puddle Pirate says, like to see Candace Owens learn more, speak less, and promote herself less blatantly. So just to close this, Dave Big Booty says him not having a college degree is a big plus for me. It is for me too, actually. So let me just close on this note here, because I think this goes to the whole Milo thing and the Candace thing and to some other degrees. Ben Shapiro has become very visible through hard work. I've never known anybody who works as hard as Ben Shapiro. I mean, Ben Shapiro is a machine. He's written, I don't know how many books he's written, 7, 8, 10 books, something like that. He does his daily show. He writes something like 6 or 7 articles a day for Daily Wire. I mean, he's just a machine. He's a machine. And he's a very, very, very smart guy. So Ben, in my mind, has paid his dues and has earned his fame and his influence because Ben got famous not by being outrageous. Ben got famous by being unbelievably well-armed intellectually. I think it's a pretty fair assumption to say that Ben Shapiro didn't get where he is on the basis of his warm personality. But I don't think anybody would begrudge Ben Shapiro the success and the fame he's amassed and the influence he's amassed because Ben earned it. Ben did the work. He knows this stuff backwards and forwards. Candace Owens and Milo are very similar in that they're both converts, recent converts, and they've been elevated very, very, very quickly, much too quickly for their own good. They've been pushed into the spotlight specifically because of the identity politics that the left runs by. In other words, if Milo wasn't gay, nobody would know who he is. And same for Candace if she wasn't black. This is not to demean them in any way. What they do requires an enormous amount of courage, and I ought to know. I've been victimized by this. When I say I don't want to use that word victim, I'm not a victim. I don't like that word victim. I've been attacked unfairly. Let's put it that way. And if you're a gay Republican or a black Republican, you get all of the stuff that I get, and you also get the whole traitor to your race, traitor to your sex, traitor to your people kind of thing. You get. I can promote conservative ideas and not be cut off by my own people, but for Milo and Candace, it's been a bit of a shock to realize that the people who they thought were their people aren't their people, and the people who they thought were the enemy are in fact their people. So, look, I think that the whole beauty of the thing is just the difference of approaches, right? Everybody has their appeal, and people have their favorites. A lot of people like Steven Crowder. I think Crowder's really funny, and very. Crowder's got a lot of street courage. Crowder's another one of those guys that likes the fight and the confrontation. I don't enjoy that at all. I'd much rather do my work from geostationary orbit and just drop these, cadmium rods into the atmosphere at Mach 25 or whatever they're made out of. But there's something for everybody. And this, I'll close on this, actually. I'll close the show on this. Regardless of what you think of Milo versus Ben or YAF or TPUSA or any of it, I never fail to be amazed. I have been from the beginning of me doing this, end of 2002, last month or two of 2002. From the beginning, I have been astonished, absolutely astonished, amazed, and very, very, very proud of two things. First of all, our people, our audience, are just plain better people than theirs. They're more moral, they're much more intelligent, they're more highly educated, they're better people in every way. The conservative fan base is the most inventive, quiet, humble, hardworking, ingenious people I've ever met. And that's saying nothing about the soldiers and policemen as well. I am in absolute awe of the people that support me and the people who come out to see me. I'm in awe of all of you. I just love it. I love talking to everybody, and I love being the last person out of the room. And what I find on the left, generally speaking, certainly this seems to be the case for Bill Maher and Michael Moore and the rest of them, they have a lot of contempt for their audience. They don't want to mix with people. They want to helicopter in, say their thing, collect their $45,000 check, and exit the back door before anybody can put their filthy commoner hands on them. And I don't feel that way, and it's appropriate. Our people are just better. When Robert De Niro started that Tony Award tirade by saying, F Trump, and he got a standing ovation, I had a couple things to say about that. First of all, in the 8 years I was criticizing Obama, which I was doing enthusiastically and continuously, I never said F Obama, and I don't know of anybody in the business who said that, ever. And then I realized the reason we haven't said it was because if I'd started a speech by saying that, half of my audience, who hates Obama as much as I do, half of my audience would get up and walk away, and they'd be right to do so. I could say F the devil, F taxes, F this, F that. I could say all these things. And they would, a lot of people just get up and leave. And I would lose 4 out of the remaining 5 out of 10. It's because our side is just better people, higher quality people in every way, smarter, kinder, more generous, more moral. So that makes me very, very proud. And the thing that makes me very proud in the other direction is this. I get to be on the side of Ben Shapiro and Milo and Candace Owens and all the rest of them. I get to be on the side of those guys. I get to be on the same side as Crowder and all the rest of them. But I also get to be on the same side as people like Ben Carson, who is an astonishingly talented guy and the worst public speaker I've ever seen. But a brilliant man. And all this just to lead up to say that the conservative side of this debate is populated by giants. I mean, intellectual giants. Victor Davis Hanson and Thomas Sowell and Buckley and all of the justices and all of the thinkers. I mean, there are actual intellectual artillery pieces on our side. And I keep thinking, where are they? Where are the left's Jordan Petersons or Victor Davis Hansons or Thomas Sowells? Where are they? Where are they? And the reason is we don't see them is because there aren't any. the closest thing they have is Noam Chomsky. And Noam Chomsky was apparently really quite a good linguist, but his political ideas are nonsense. The man's 100 years old. He hasn't written anything of any value in 30 or 40 years. So who do they have? We have people that have read all of these histories, and they know the history of the world. Our people, our pundits are so well educated, so well informed. They know all of this stuff. And the left trots out Michael Moore and Janine Garofalo and Robert De Niro and you know, Meryl Streep. There's no one on the left with any intellectual capability to make an argument that I can even identify. Forget listen to or have a chance. I can't even identify the argument. And the thing that is so astonishing to me and makes me so proud to have all of these intellectual heavyweights on our side, but it's as a corollary to that, it is amazing how easy it is to flip these people. It's just astonishing how easy it is to flip them. We defend these ideas. We try them out all the time. We're constantly testing them and being tested for believing them. And these people have these rote statements of things they believe. And when you simply start the first question, it's over. They just stop. They stop. And the smoke comes out of their ears, and their little necklace flashes, and they have to wait for Norman to coordinate, and they get lost. And I love doing these kind of things. I love, setting up that one question or that second question, or whatever it is that makes the smoke curl out of their ears. I've told you many times about my last week at my prior job as an editor, and this new producer came in, and I was in the lounge, and she said, "Oh, you must be that conservative I heard about." I said, "Yeah. Nice to meet you. I suppose you don't. I suppose you don't give a damn about saving the climate, huh?" And I thought, first of all, what a hateful, rude, repulsive, disgusting person. Never met you before in my life. You're here, your first day in the office. I've been doing this show for 6 years. You're going to lead with this? But that's not what I said. I said, well, okay, what climate do you want to protect? Huh? The climate now is different than the climate from 1480, and that's different from the climate from 60 million years ago, and that's different from the climate from 60,000 years ago. It's been covered by a mile of ice. It's been a mile underwater. So when you say you want to protect the climate, which climate do you want to protect? Where do you want to put the pin? And she got up and left the room. I mean, there's no response to that. They can't get past that. They don't know what to say because they've never thought past, you hate the environment. I don't hate the environment. As a matter of fact, I have to live in the environment. And then you can just go on and on and on. Why is it that capitalist countries are cleaner than socialist countries? Infinitely cleaner. Why? It's because of private property. Why is it that America is so much less polluted now than it was in the 60s, let alone the 20s or the 1800s, far less polluted now than it was 100 years ago? Why is it that there are more buffalo? It's true they nearly exterminated them, but now they're growing and they're coming back. And it's true that the Great Lakes were once pristine, but they were also toxic pits when I was a boy. Now they're clean again. The Cayuga River caught fire in Ohio. The river burned because there was so much poison and oil in it. Now you can drink out of it. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it. They don't know what to say. How can you justify somebody having 3 houses? It's disgusting. How can you justify having 750 songs on your iPhone? You had to pay $1 for every one of those songs. Why didn't you just get 20 songs? Do you listen to all 750 songs at the same time? Doink. So, anyway, I try to bring reason and analogy to this, and I try to bring humor to it. And the one enormous weapon that we never use, don't know how to use, the left uses it all the time. It's not just, we've got some funny people who can make a message palatable, and we think that we can make the conservative message entertaining, and we can, and I try to do that. But we make it entertaining, and they make it entertainment. And that's a big difference. And what that means is, put aside music and lighting and graphics and all the rest, the left gets to use sex to sell their stuff, and we don't. And I did some renderings for the first scene from this computer game video I want to do. And it's kind of a Blade Runner kind of world. And I showed some PowerPoint presentation to a group of people. And I showed some of these artwork of these, like a cyberpunk strip club on a Blade Runner future. And I realized I'm showing these smoking hot clothed women, or robots, but smoking hot pictures to this crowd of, 80-year-old, 70-year-old Republicans in Orange County. And I thought, oh, wait a minute now, I want to be careful here. And I'm looking at these pictures, and I said, folks, I can't guarantee you that that this video game idea is going to turn millennials into conservatives, but I can promise you it will turn them into heterosexuals. That I can assure you. And it's true. I've done some test renderings. Ustream says that the free ride that we've been on since we did this is ending in August, so it's going to have, one way or another, we're going to have to move this thing, which is good. Long overdue. But when we get back to that, I can't drag and drop pictures into this the way it exists now, but we'll get back to that shortly on some other platform. And when I do, I'll show you some of these latest test renders, because they will bring a whole new dynamic to this. And if you want to reach young people, especially young men, I know how to do that because I was one once. And I probably always will be, I suppose. Anyway, I think that'll do it for this episode, special Thursday edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. Made possible, as always, by our paying members at BillWhittle.com. By the way, we did a couple of 60-second SmackDown with members yesterday. That's why I had to move the show. Had a lot of fun. And then late in the day, the last call, had one of our members call in, and when we were finished recording, just sat and chatted with him. He kept saying, I don't want to keep it. So, I love talking to people. And we ended up talking for about a half an hour on Skype, just chatting about anything. And I think I'm going to make that a membership perk, to just be able to call and just say, hey, we can't do this indefinitely because there's a bunch of people, but why don't we just say, hey, we'll start talking, and after 25 minutes, a bell will go off, and we'll try and wrap it up in half an hour. We'll just chat for half an hour, and you don't have to. Not only do you not have to ask me any big questions, I prefer not to get big questions. I just like to learn more about, you guys and what you do. And it was a lovely conversation. It was an interesting conversation. And as I found, as I always do, the people who are people who follow my work, present company accepted, of course, specifically, swaggering fighter pilot and known miscreant, Matt Lloyd. Those two guys with obvious exception, but as a general rule, the people who follow my work are very interesting and very good people, and I love talking to them. So that'll do it. And now it's time for this boy to go home. He's got an actual home to go to instead of just an apartment, and instead of just a place to live, got an actual home. Somebody waiting for me, and not only that. I am a river to my people. I have this beautiful wife. I've got 3 cats. I've got a bird now. We have a couple of raccoons, several possums, 2 or 3 neighborhood cats, a large number of squirrels. If you didn't see the post earlier today of me feeding the bird and my cat trying to get because we put cat food into the syringe to feed the bird with, kitten food. But I realized as I was doing all this earlier today, and Natasha just shot it and said, you should put it online. So we did. But I remember thinking, well, what am I going to call this? And I remember thinking, I'm looking around at all of these creatures, and I remember thinking, the bird's name is Chirpy, by the way. And we thought it might have been we were told it was a sparrow. I knew it wasn't a sparrow. The beak was too long. We thought it might have been a woodpecker, but it's actually a starling, we think. But I remember that classic line from Lawrence of Arabia, Anthony Quinn, and I looked up the exact words and I put it on the post, and it's like, The Turks pay me a fortune. The conservatives pay me a fortune in gold, and yet I am poor, because I am a river to my people. And, just feed everybody. It's a good feeling. Makes you feel like a man, and it makes up for an awful lot of irresponsibility and an awful lot of avoidance in my early years. It's nice to be responsible for people, and it's nice to sign the front of checks as well, which is if you've never had that experience, I cannot recommend it highly enough. Okay, so that'll do it for Stratosphere Lounge. We're going to say goodbye to our friends on YouTube first. Thanks so much for watching, as you always do. And again, special thanks to our members out there. I don't remember which show it is. I want to say it's 188, something. Nobody cares. We will see you next week. Okay, bye.